A woman in a car of polished obsidian crashed into the world of a man who owned nothing but a dented lunchbox. She did not know he held the key to the empire she was about to lose. The building was her testament. Glass and steel, a shard of midnight thrust into the city's heart. Alara Vance saw it not as architecture, but as a statement of power, clean and irrefutable. She owned the skyline. That night, the air in the executive garage was chilled, smelling of cured concrete and electricity. Her heels clicked a sharp, impatient rhythm on the polished floor. A problem with the geothermal regulators on the 48th floor required her personal attention. It was an annoyance, a flaw in the perfect machine she had willed into existence. She swept past the banks of silent, sleeping elevators, heading for the service lift. That was where she saw him. He was standing by the control panel, his back to her. The gray uniform of the night maintenance crew hung on his frame, clean but worn. He held a metal lunchbox, old and dented, its silver surface scarred with the ghosts of 1,000 small impacts. She stopped. The presence of another person this late, in this sanctum, was a disruption. The presence of that lunchbox was an offense. It was a relic from another time, a piece of a world she had spent her entire life escaping. A world of rust and manual labor. She cleared her throat, a sound like ice cracking. The man turned slowly. He was not old, but his face held a quiet stillness that seemed ancient. His eyes were calm, assessing her without surprise or deference. She gestured with a flick of her wrist, a dismissal aimed at the box in his hand. That is not permitted in the executive areas. He looked down at the lunchbox as if seeing it for the first time, then back at her. His gaze was unervingly direct. It goes where I go. The simplicity of the statement, the lack of apology, was galling. It was insubordination, spoken quietly. Alara felt a familiar cold fury rise within her. She managed people, markets, entire corporate ecosystems. She did not debate with janitors. This is the Vance Tower, my tower, and my rules state that personal effects of that nature are to be kept in the staff lockers. He considered her words. Some things are not personal effects. They are tools. A flicker of movement caught her eye. A small, laminated photograph was tucked under the latch of the lunchbox. A woman with a brilliant, unguarded smile. Alara's gaze hardened. She saw sentimentality as a weakness, a fatal flaw in the architecture of success. I am going to the 48th floor. You will take me there, and then you will return here and store that item properly. He nodded once, a gesture of compliance that felt nothing like submission. He pressed the button for the lift. The doors slid open with a whisper. Inside the small, sterile box of the service elevator, the silence was heavy. She stood in her corner, radiating impatience. He stood in his, the dented lunchbox held securely in one hand. The silence stretched. She found herself watching his hands. They were clean, the nails short, but the knuckles were scarred and the skin was calloused. The hands of a man who worked. Yet, he held the lunchbox with a strange sort of care, his thumb resting near the faded photograph. The geothermal regulators, she said, breaking the quiet. A design flaw, apparently. He did not look at her. He watched the floor numbers climb. There is no flaw in the design. The words were low, certain. Alara almost laughed. And you would know this because you personally inspected the schematics? A beat of silence. Yes. The sheer audacity of it left her speechless for a moment. The lift slowed, its arrival announced by a soft chime. The doors opened onto the dark, cavernous space of the 48th floor. He stepped out, holding the door for her. The problem is not the design. It is the implementation. Someone cut corners on the manifold gaskets, used a cheaper polymer blend. He spoke as if stating a simple, observable fact, like the time of day. She stared at him, at the quiet authority in his voice. Who are you? He met her eyes. The night janitor. He gestured down the corridor. The primary access panel is this way. She followed, her mind racing, the sharp clicks of her heels sounding hesitant for the first time. He was right. An hour later, standing beside the building's chief engineer who she had summoned from his bed, Alara listened to a flustered, technical explanation. It seemed, he stammered, that a subcontractor had swapped the specified gaskets for a cheaper, inferior model. It was a matter of implementation, not design. The words echoed in the sterile maintenance corridor. She dismissed the engineer with a wave. She was alone again. The janitor was gone. So was his lunchbox. The next morning, Alara sat in her office, a glass cage suspended 50 stories above the city. The world below was a complex machine, a system of inputs and outputs she understood. The janitor was an anomaly. She pulled up the employee database. A few keystrokes. Elias Thorne. His file was sparse. Hired 6 months ago. Previous employment, a series of manual labor jobs. Address in a forgotten, working-class neighborhood. No commendations. No disciplinary actions. A ghost in the machine. But there was a flag on his security clearance. Redacted. Restricted access. Level 9. Her own access level was 10. Only the board and senior security staff had level 9. A janitor. She leaned back in her chair, the leather creaking softly. This was no longer an annoyance. It was a puzzle. And Alara Vance did not tolerate unsolved puzzles in her own house. She spent the day in meetings, her mind a fortress of strategy and numbers. But a small part of her consciousness was snagged on a dented metal box and a man with quiet eyes. That evening, she did something she had not done in years. She left the tower at 5. She drove her own car, a silent electric predator, through the congested arteries of the city. She went to the address from his file. It was a neighborhood of small, tidy houses with postage stamp lawns. Trees grew here, old and patient. It felt like a different country. She parked down the street, watching. His house was the smallest on the block, but the fence was freshly painted and a child's bicycle lay on the lawn. The front door opened. Elias Thorne emerged. He was not wearing the gray uniform. He wore jeans and a simple shirt. He looked younger. A little girl with dark, serious eyes ran out after him, launching herself into his arms. He swung her up, and for a moment, his face was transformed by a smile. It was a smile of such profound, unarmored love that Alara felt a strange pang, a feeling she could not name. She watched them walk down the street to a small park. The girl, his daughter, chattered, pointing at a dog, a bird, the sky. He listened, his full attention on her. They sat on a bench. The girl pulled a drawing from a small backpack. It was a picture of a tall, shiny building with a smiling sun above it. Her building. Alara felt like an intruder, a spy in a land of simple, inexplicable truths. She was about to start her car, to retreat to her own world of clean lines and clear objectives, when the little girl looked up. The child's eyes met hers across the park. There was no suspicion in her gaze, only curiosity. The girl hopped off the bench and walked toward the car. Elias stood, a watchful stillness coming over him. The girl stopped at Alara's window. She held up the drawing. "For you," she said, her voice small but clear. Alara was frozen. She did not know how to interact with children. They were unpredictable variables. She lowered the window a few inches. The girl pushed the drawing through the gap. Her small fingers brushed against Alara's. "It's for the lady in the glass house," she said. Then she turned and ran back to her father. Elias put a hand on his daughter's shoulder, his eyes fixed on Alara's car. He gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. It was not a thank you. It was an acknowledgement. A challenge. Alara drove away, the child's drawing on the passenger seat beside her. A crayon sketch of her empire, given freely. Back in her office, under the cold glow of the architectural lighting, the drawing seemed impossibly bright. She looked at the smiling sun, the crooked lines of the tower. She felt a crack in her composure. She turned back to her computer. Level 9 clearance. There had to be a reason. She bypassed the Human Resources Department and went straight to the building's core security protocols. She used her own credentials, then layered them with an override code she had insisted on for just such an occasion. The system resisted. Then, with a soft digital click, it yielded. Elias Thorne's file opened. The redaction was gone. It was a single line of text. Next of kin access protocol. Spouse, Anya Thorne. Deceased. Former employee ID 771. Anya Thorne. The name was vaguely familiar. Alara cross-referenced it with the company's R&D archives. The archives were deep, digital catacombs. She found her. Anya Thorne, a senior systems architect. She had died 5 years ago. A workplace accident, the file said. A fall in one of the old labs. A tragic loss. Alara kept digging. She pulled up the patent filings for the new tower. Specifically, for the geothermal system, the atmospheric regulators, the integrated energy grid. The very soul of the building. The patents were held by the corporation, of course. But the lead inventor listed was Marcus Thorne, her chief operating officer. Her rival. The man who wanted her job. And the date the patents were filed. 2 weeks after Anya Thorne's death. The pieces clicked into place with the cold, hard certainty of a locking mechanism. She stared at the screen, at the smiling corporate headshot of Marcus. He had built his career on those patents. They were the foundation of his power within the company. She looked from Marcus's face to the child's drawing. A glass house. She felt a sudden, visceral chill. The walls around her, the walls she had thought were her fortress, suddenly felt very, very thin. The next day, Marcus called an emergency meeting. He stood before the board, a picture of sleek, predatory confidence. He presented a series of slides, all polished graphs and alarming projections. A new expansion project, one Alara had championed, was supposedly hemorrhaging money. His data was elegant, persuasive, and utterly false. Alara knew it was false. She watched him, seeing him now not as a rival, but as a thief. He was trying to engineer a vote of no confidence. He was making his move. She calmly dismantled his arguments, one by one. She had the real data, the true numbers. She always did. She won the room, but she saw the look in his eyes as the meeting concluded. It was cold, reptilian. He cornered her by the elevators. A bold move, Alara, but a foolish one. Some things are better left buried. His smile did not reach his eyes. You should be careful. This is a very big building. Accidents can happen. It was not a suggestion. It was a promise. That night, she worked late again. She was reviewing the old security logs from the lab where Anya Thorne had died. Most of the data was corrupted. Conveniently corrupted. Suddenly, the lights in her office went out. The door clicked shut. A soft hiss, and she recognized the sound of the magnetic locks engaging. She was trapped. Her phone had no signal. The emergency override on her desk console was dead. The building, her building, had turned against her. It was a warning shot from Marcus. A demonstration of his control over the systems he had stolen. Panic, cold and sharp, tried to claw its way up her throat. She forced it down. She was Alara Vance. She did not panic. She sat in the dark, in the heart of her silent, hostile kingdom, and she thought. An hour passed. 2. Then, she heard a faint sound. A soft scraping at the door. A series of clicks. The magnetic locks disengaged with a thud. The door swung open. Elias Thorne stood there, holding a keycard in one hand and his dented lunchbox in the other. He looked at her, then around the darkened office. He seems to have forgotten who laid the fiber optic cable. He spoke of Marcus as if he were a temporary inconvenience. How did you know? She asked, her voice tight. I make it my business to know when the house is sick. He looked at her, his expression unreadable in the dim light from the corridor. You should go home. It is not safe here for you anymore. Home. Her penthouse apartment, a sterile expanse of white and chrome, felt as cold and alien as this office. It was not a home. It was a holding cell. I cannot. He will see it as a victory. He will consolidate his power. Then do not go home. He said it so simply. He turned and started walking down the corridor. She hesitated for only a second. Then she followed him. They rode the service elevator down in silence. In the garage, she walked toward her car. He stopped her. No, it will be tracked. He led her to an old, unremarkable truck parked in a maintenance bay. It was clean but dented, much like his lunchbox. The engine turned over with a low, steady rumble. He drove with a quiet economy of motion, navigating the sleeping city with an easy familiarity. He took her to his house. The small house she had spied on from the safety of her car. Inside, it was warm and smelled of sawdust and lemon polish. Books were stacked on every available surface. Schematics and blueprints were neatly rolled and stored in a corner. A half-finished wooden toy, a complex mechanical bird, sat on a workbench. The little girl, Lily, was asleep in a small room, a nightlight casting a soft glow on her face. Alara stood awkwardly in the center of the living room, a creature of glass and steel transplanted into a world of wood and warmth. She felt her corporate armor, her carefully constructed identity, begin to flake away. Elias made tea. He placed a steaming mug in her hands. Her fingers, cold and stiff, trembled slightly as she took it. He sat across from her at a simple wooden table he had clearly built himself. He placed the lunchbox on the table between them. The silence was not empty. It was waiting. "Tell me about your wife," Alara said, her voice softer than she intended. Elias looked at the lunchbox, his hand resting on its scarred lid. Her name was Anya. He spoke of her not with grief, but with a kind of fierce, reverent clarity. She was brilliant. She did not just see buildings. She saw systems, ecosystems. She believed a building could be alive, could breathe. He explained that the core patents for the Vance Tower, the technology that made it a landmark of green innovation, were all hers. They were her life's work. She worked under Marcus. She trusted him. He was her mentor. He paused, the memory painful. She was about to expose a flaw in another one of his projects. A structural weakness he had covered up. She told him she was going to the board. The next day, she was dead. The investigation was a sham. A quick, clean corporate whitewash. Marcus was promoted a month later. He filed the patents under his own name. He built his career on her grave. Alara listened, the cold knot of fury in her stomach tightening. This was not just theft. It was erasure. Why did you not come forward? Why take a job as a janitor? He finally looked at her, and his eyes held the weight of 5 years of calculated patience. Land doesn't rush. To bring down a mountain, you do not use a hammer. You find the fault lines. You wait for the rain. He told her he had spent years gathering evidence. But the final piece, the direct link between Marcus and the cover-up of the accident, was buried deep inside the company's digital fortress. A place he could not reach from the outside. I needed to be inside the walls. To watch. To listen. Most people only see what is flowering. They miss what is moving underneath. He opened the lunchbox. It did not contain food. It was filled with small, leather-bound notebooks. Page after page was covered in Anya's elegant, precise handwriting. Equations, diagrams, theories. The genesis of the Vance Tower. Her soul, transcribed in ink. "This is the proof of her work," he said, "but it is not proof of his crime." Alara reached out and touched one of the notebooks. The worn leather was cool against her skin. She felt a surge of something she had not felt in a very long time. A sense of purpose that had nothing to do with profit margins or market share. It was a sense of justice. "He has the keys to the kingdom," she said, "but he does not realize we are about to change all the locks." An alliance was formed in that small, quiet house. For the next 2 days, they worked. His home became their command center. Alara, cut off from her corporate resources, discovered a new kind of strength. She worked from a cheap laptop, her fingers flying across the keys. She directed her loyal assistant, Lena, through encrypted messages, turning her into a digital ghost inside the Vance network. Elias worked beside her, his methodical calm a steadying anchor. He understood the building's digital and physical infrastructure better than its architects. He guided Lena through back doors and forgotten service portals he had discovered during his nightly rounds. He drew maps of the server farms from memory. He knew the system's weaknesses because his wife had designed its strengths. Lily would come and sit with them, drawing pictures or quietly reading. She would sometimes bring Alara a glass of water or a piece of fruit, a small, solemn offering. In those moments, Alara felt the ice around her heart begin to thaw. She was not just a CEO. She was a person in a room with other people. It was a revelation. On the second night, they found it. Lena, guided by Elias, unearthed a deeply buried file on a redundant server in a sub-basement. It was a final report from the original safety inspector on Anya's accident. The report was definitive. Structural failure of a safety railing, a railing that had been signed off on by Marcus Thorne himself only a week prior. Attached to the file was a deleted work order. A maintenance crew had been scheduled to replace that exact railing the day after Anya's death. But the smoking gun was an audio file, automatically recorded by the lab's security system and mislabeled as a corrupted data packet. It was 2 minutes long. 2 minutes of a heated argument between Anya and Marcus. Anya's voice, clear and strong, accusing him of falsifying stress reports. His voice, a venomous whisper, telling her to back down. Then, the sound of a struggle. A sharp cry. And then, silence. 2 seconds of silence. Long ones. They sat in the quiet living room, the terrible finality of the recording hanging in the air. Elias closed his eyes, his face a mask of grief held in check by sheer force of will. Alara reached out, her hand hovering over his for a moment before she drew it back. "Now we have him," she said, her voice a cold, hard whisper. The plan was simple and brutal. Alara used her authority as CEO to call an emergency meeting of the board of directors for the following morning. The agenda was listed as a full corporate restructuring. Marcus would see it as his final victory, the moment she was forced to concede. He would walk into that boardroom expecting a coronation. He would find an execution. The next morning, Alara walked back into the Vance Tower. She was not the same woman who had fled it 2 nights before. Her suit was still immaculate, her posture still perfect. But her eyes were different. They held a new kind of clarity, a new weight. Elias came with her. He was not in his janitor's uniform. He wore a simple, dark suit that fit him perfectly. He carried a worn leather briefcase instead of his lunchbox. He was no longer a ghost in the machine. He was its memory. They walked into the boardroom together. Marcus was already there, holding court, his smile wide and triumphant. When he saw them enter, his smile faltered for a fraction of a second. He looked at Elias, a flicker of confusion and annoyance in his eyes. "Alara, this is a closed meeting. I think your guest is lost." Alara took her seat at the head of the table. She placed a single tablet in front of her. "Mr. Thorne is not lost. He is here at my invitation, as a guest of the board." The board members murmured, confused. Marcus's eyes narrowed. He sensed the trap, but he did not yet understand its shape. Alara began to speak. Her voice was calm, measured, devoid of emotion. She did not present accusations. She presented facts. She started with the geothermal regulators and the inferior gaskets. A small matter of corporate malfeasance, she called it. A symptom of a deeper sickness. Then she moved to the patents. She laid out the timeline, the dates, the inconsistencies. She projected Anya Thorne's name onto the main screen. A photograph of the smiling woman from the lunchbox filled the room. Marcus went pale. "This is absurd. A desperate, slanderous attack." Alara ignored him. She continued, her voice relentless. She detailed the safety reports, the work orders, the cover-up. With every word, another brick was removed from the foundation of Marcus's career. Finally, she looked directly at him. Her eyes were like chips of ice. "And then, there is the matter of a 2-minute audio file." She pressed a button on her tablet. Anya's voice filled the silent, stunned boardroom. The argument. The struggle. The cry. The terrible, damning silence. When it was over, no one moved. The color had drained completely from Marcus's face. He looked like a statue carved from ash. Alara stood up. "I believe security is waiting for you outside, Marcus." He was led from the room, his empire crumbling around him. The doors closed. Alara addressed the shocked board. "Effective immediately, all patents held by Marcus Thorne are to be reassigned to the estate of their true creator, Anya Thorne." She looked at Elias, who had not said a word, his presence a silent, powerful testament. "Furthermore, I am proposing the creation of the Anya Thorne Foundation for Ethical Innovation. It will be funded by a majority of the profits from these patents. Its mission will be to support engineers and designers who prioritize integrity over profit." She paused, letting the words settle. "I will be stepping down as CEO to oversee the foundation personally." A new chapter was beginning. Not just for the company, but for her. 6 months passed. The seasons turned. Alara sold her penthouse apartment, the glass box in the sky. She sold her car, the silent obsidian predator. She shed the trappings of her old life like a snake sheds its skin. The work with the foundation was challenging, meaningful. It was the best work she had ever done. But there was a piece missing. One afternoon, she got into a simple, practical car and drove. She did not need an address. She knew the way. She drove to the neighborhood with the old trees and the small, tidy houses. She parked down the street. He was in the yard, just as she had imagined. Elias was mending a fence. Lily was beside him, handing him nails from a canvas pouch. He looked up as she approached, as if he had been expecting her. There was no surprise in his eyes, only a quiet welcome. She stopped at the broken section of the fence. The wood was weathered, silvered by the sun. He did not speak. He simply held out a hammer. She took it. The weight of it was unfamiliar in her hand, but solid. Real. She knelt down, her expensive trousers pressing into the damp earth. He held a post steady. She hammered in a nail. The sound was loud in the afternoon quiet. Thud, thud, thud. Lily came over and silently offered Alara a nail from her pouch. Alara looked at the child's upturned, trusting face. She looked at Elias, his hand steady on the fence post, his knuckles scarred. A small, genuine smile touched her lips for the first time in a very long time. She took the nail. His hand rested near hers on the top of the post, not touching, but close enough to feel the warmth. Together, in the fading light, they began to build. Some fences mark where a world ends. Others show where one is just beginning.